On some days, history does not arrive loudly. It settles in quietly, marked by absence rather than announcement. Today is one of those days. Across art, sport, public service, and sound, for American lives reached their final stillness, each leaving behind work that once moved millions without ever asking for applause. A cartoonist who translated office life into satire and truth. An athlete whose discipline turned motion into mastery. A public servant who led not through ambition, but continuity. And a composer whose music became part of childhood memory without ever seeking recognition. Their paths never crossed, yet together they shaped how a nation worked, played, governed, and remembered. This hour is not about loss alone, but about the quiet weight of lives that continue to echo. The news arrived quietly, confirmed in the early hours, carrying with it an unexpected stillness. On January 13, 2026, Scott Raymond Adams passed away, closing the chapter on a life that spent decades observing the modern workplace with unusual clarity. There were no grand stages in this beginning, only the quiet realization that a familiar voice, once present in newspapers and office conversations, had gone silent. Scott Adams was born on June 8, 1957, at a time when work was often seen as stability rather than satire. His early life followed a practical path. He studied economics and later earned an MBA, preparing for a future that looked orderly and predictable. Like millions of others, he entered the corporate world believing effort and structure would lead to progress. Instead, he found something else: patterns of confusion, management contradictions, and the small frustrations that shaped everyday office life. Those years behind a desk became his real education. Adams worked in various corporate roles, watching how decisions were made and how workers adapted. Meetings stretched without purpose. Memos replaced meaning. Titles mattered more than outcomes. Rather than growing bitter, he began to observe. Quietly, he took notes. Later, he would say that the office was a perfect setting for comedy, because it was already absurd. In 1989, that observation took shape as a simple comic strip called Dilbert. At first, it gained little attention. The characters were plain. The humor was dry. But the truth inside it was unmistakable. Dilbert was not a hero. He was an engineer trying to survive systems that made little sense. His boss was not evil, only confused. The jokes did not exaggerate. They reflected. By the mid-1990s, Dilbert had become a national presence. It appeared in thousands of newspapers across the United States and beyond. Office workers taped strips to cubicle walls and shared them in break rooms. For many, it felt like someone was finally saying out loud what had long been felt in silence. One longtime reader later wrote online, "Dilbert didn't make fun of my job. It explained it." As the strip grew, so did its influence. Adams published books that expanded the comic's ideas, blending humor with commentary on business culture. These works explored why systems fail, how persuasion works, and why intelligence often struggles inside rigid structures. His writing remained accessible, never academic, always grounded in lived experience. He spoke in the same language people used at work, and that made his insights travel far. Yet Adams himself remained an unlikely cultural figure. He did not come from elite creative circles, nor did he present himself as an artist in the traditional sense. He often described his success as a result of pattern recognition rather than genius. In one interview, he said, "I just drew what I saw every day, and other people recognized it too." That recognition became his quiet bond with readers. As the years passed, the workplace changed. Technology reshaped communication. Offices became digital. Still, Dilbert remained relevant, adapting its humor to new tools and new frustrations. Even as trends shifted, the core themes stayed the same: confusion, ambition, and the human cost of poorly designed systems. Adams had captured something timeless. In the mid-2010s, his public presence began to shift. Adams emerged as an independent commentator on social and political events, sharing his views openly and often controversially. This phase of his life brought complexity to his public image. Supporters saw a thinker applying systems logic to public life. Critics saw a voice that sometimes divided opinion. The chapter acknowledges this period not to judge, but to reflect the full arc of a life lived in public view. Despite disagreements, few questioned his impact. Even those who challenged his views often separated the work from the debate. A former editor once noted, "No matter how people felt about Scott later, Dilbert had already earned its place." It changed how workplaces talked about themselves. On January 13, 2026, Adams' death marked the end of a voice that had been quietly present for nearly 4 decades. There was no dramatic announcement, only the slow spread of the news. Online tributes appeared from readers who had long since left office jobs but still remembered the strips. One post read simply, "He made the workday lighter." That mattered more than he knew. In reflecting on his legacy, it becomes clear that Scott Adams did more than create jokes. He gave language to a shared experience. He helped people laugh at systems that often felt overwhelming. In doing so, he offered relief, recognition, and sometimes clarity. His work reminded readers that frustration was not always personal, it was often structural. Today, the cubicles he once drew may look different, and the tools have changed. But the feeling he captured remains familiar. Meetings still wander. Emails still replace answers. And somewhere, a quiet observer may still be watching, learning, and smiling. Scott Raymond Adams leaves behind drawings, books, and ideas that continue to circulate long after the ink has dried. His humor did not shout. It nodded. And in that gentle recognition, millions found comfort. Though his pen is now still, the reflection he offered endures, on office walls, in memory, and in the shared understanding of what it means to work and to endure together. The confirmation came without spectacle, a quiet update carried across sports circles early in the day. On January 10, 2026, James Hartung passed away, leaving behind a silence shaped by a life that was almost always in motion. For those who knew his work, the stillness felt unfamiliar. James Hartung was born in Omaha in 1960, in a city where discipline was learned early and routines mattered. From childhood, his days followed structure. Training came before comfort. Repetition came before reward. Gymnastics was not treated as performance, but as control, each movement measured, each landing exact. Those close to him often recalled how calm he seemed even as a young athlete, already focused on balance rather than attention. As he grew, that discipline deepened. At the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Hartung became a central figure in collegiate gymnastics. He was not the loudest presence in the gym, but he was the most consistent. Teammates remember him as steady, someone whose preparation never changed regardless of the moment. One former teammate later said, "When James stepped onto the mat, the room felt quieter. Everyone trusted what would happen next." His results followed naturally. Hartung helped lead 4 national championship teams, a reflection of collective effort rather than individual display. He earned consecutive NCAA all-around titles, achievements that spoke to endurance and mental control more than raw power. These were not moments of flash, but seasons of sustained excellence. Coaches often pointed to him as an example of how mastery is built slowly, through patience. Yet Hartung never framed his success as something extraordinary. Those who worked with him recall that he rarely spoke about medals. Instead, he talked about process. About showing up on time. About correcting small errors. About doing the same thing well, again and again. In one interview years later, he reflected simply, "If the work is right, the result usually follows." The story of his career reached a wider audience at the 1984 Summer Olympics. Competing as part of the U.S. men's national gymnastics team, Hartung earned a gold medal during a moment when American athletics were finding renewed confidence on the world stage. The victory was celebrated, but even then, Hartung's presence remained understated. He did not seek the spotlight. He shared it. Within that Olympic moment, his role represented something larger. Preparation outweighed personality. Discipline outweighed noise. It was a reminder that greatness does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, built over years that few people see. After competition, Hartung's influence did not fade. He remained connected to the sport through coaching, mentorship, and institutional guidance. Younger athletes learned from him not through speeches, but through example. He watched closely, corrected gently, and expected focus. One athlete later wrote online, "Coach Hartung never raised his voice. You just didn't want to disappoint him." As the years passed, his presence became part of the foundation of the programs he touched. Championships were remembered, but so was his approach. He valued balance, between body and mind, effort and rest, ambition and humility. Those lessons stayed with athletes long after routines were forgotten. The chapter of his life closed on January 10, 2026. The news moved slowly, as if the world needed time to adjust to the idea that someone so defined by movement was suddenly still. There was no dramatic announcement, only quiet acknowledgments from sports organizations, former teammates, and students. A short message from a former coach read, "James taught us that control is strength." His lessons remain. In reflecting on his legacy, it becomes clear that James Hartung did more than win medals. He shaped standards. He showed what consistency looks like when no one is watching. His influence lives on in the way athletes train, prepare, and respect the craft of their sport. Gymnastics is a discipline where moments are brief, but preparation is endless. Hartung understood that better than most. His life reminded others that excellence does not require spectacle. It requires care, patience, and quiet resolve. Today, the gym floors he once crossed remain, and the routines continue. Somewhere, a young athlete repeats a movement until it feels right, not knowing the name of the man who once set that example. And in that unseen continuation, James Hartung's legacy endures, steady, controlled, and deeply felt, long after the final landing. The news was confirmed quietly, without urgency or spectacle. On January 11, 2026, Richard James Cody passed away, closing a chapter of American public life defined not by sudden moments, but by steady presence. For many in New Jersey, it felt like losing a familiar structure, something that had always been there, working in the background. Richard Cody was born in 1946, at a time when public service was often seen as a long commitment rather than a brief ambition. His political journey began in 1974, when he entered the New Jersey legislature. From the start, his approach was practical. He listened more than he spoke. He stayed local. And he focused on continuity rather than attention. Over the decades, Cody became a constant within the state's political system. While national politics shifted rapidly, his career moved steadily forward. He served for years in the legislature and eventually became Senate President, a role he held with calm authority. Colleagues often described him as reliable, someone who knew the system not from theory, but from experience. One longtime staff member later said, "Richard didn't chase power. He carried responsibility." In 2004, during a period of institutional uncertainty, Cody unexpectedly assumed the role of governor of New Jersey. The transition was not marked by celebration or dramatic speeches. Instead, it was framed as duty. His governorship did not feel like a personal milestone, but an extension of the work he had always done. He governed with the same tone he had used for years, measured, accessible, and grounded. Rather than pushing sweeping rhetoric, Cody focused on stability. His leadership style stood apart from national political theater. He believed governance was about showing up consistently, understanding local needs, and maintaining trust. A fellow legislator once remarked, "When things felt uncertain, Richard made them feel manageable." That was his strength. After his time as governor, Cody did not step away from public life. He returned to the legislature, continuing to serve without interruption. For more than 5 decades, his presence shaped policy, mentorship, and institutional memory. Younger lawmakers learned from him not through speeches, but through observation. He remembered details others forgot. He understood how decisions made years earlier still mattered. One of the most significant aspects of Cody's public life was his openness about mental health. At a time when many leaders avoided the subject, he spoke about it calmly and without performance. He did not frame it as a political message, but as a human reality. His honesty helped shift conversations across the state. A mental health advocate later shared, "He didn't turn it into a headline. He made it normal." That changed everything. This quiet courage became part of his legacy. By speaking plainly, Cody made space for others to do the same. His approach reflected who he was, direct, steady, and unafraid to address difficult truths without dramatizing them. When news of his passing spread on January 11, 2026, reactions came slowly. Tributes focused less on titles and more on time. People spoke about years of service, remembered phone calls returned, and meetings attended without complaint. One message shared online read, "He knew how things worked, and he cared enough to keep them working." In reflecting on Richard Cody's life, it becomes clear that his influence cannot be measured by a single moment. It lived in continuity. In the way institutions remained steady. In the way conversations shifted quietly. In the way leadership was modeled without noise. Public service often celebrates change, but Cody's life reminds us of the value of endurance. He showed that stability is not passive. It is active, demanding, and deeply human. His absence will not be felt all at once, but gradually, when memory is needed, and his voice is no longer there to provide it. Richard James Cody leaves behind a legacy built on presence rather than performance. His years of service continue to shape the state he loved. And in the calm spaces of governance, where steady hands matter most, his impact remains, lasting, instructive, and quietly honored. The news was shared softly, almost as if it didn't want to interrupt the memories it carried. On January 8, 2026, Guy Vernon Moon passed away, marking the quiet departure of a man whose work had long lived in the background of countless childhoods. Guy Vernon Moon was born in 1962, during a time when animation was changing shape. Music was no longer just filler between scenes. It was becoming a guide for emotion, timing, and memory. Moon entered this world not seeking recognition, but purpose. He understood early that sound could shape feeling before words ever could. His career unfolded inside studios rather than spotlights. Moon became part of a creative generation that helped define animated television for millions of children. Through shows like The Fairly OddParents, Danny Phantom, and Johnny Test, his music shaped how stories moved forward. It told viewers when to laugh, when to pause, and when to feel something deeper. What made his work special was its balance. Moon's compositions were playful without being chaotic, structured without being rigid. The melodies felt familiar, even on first listen. Many viewers grew up humming tunes without ever knowing who wrote them. One fan later posted, "I didn't know his name, but I knew his music my whole life." Moon rarely stepped into public view, and that suited him. His success was measured not by applause, but by repetition. Episode after episode, his music did its job quietly. It blended into scenes so naturally that it became invisible. And yet, when removed, something always felt missing. Colleagues often described him as thoughtful and precise. He listened closely before composing, allowing characters and pacing to guide his choices. A fellow composer once shared, "Guy didn't overpower a scene. He lifted it just enough." That restraint became his signature. As animation evolved, so did his work. Technology changed, production speeds increased, and audiences grew more global. Still, Moon's approach stayed grounded. He believed that music should support emotion, not demand attention. That philosophy helped his work age gracefully, continuing to resonate long after episodes first aired. For many adults today, his music has become a bridge back to childhood. A familiar tune can trigger a memory of sitting close to a television, of laughter after school, of comfort in animated worlds that felt safe. Moon's compositions did not shout nostalgia. They carried it gently. When word of his passing spread on January 8, 2026, tributes appeared quietly across social media. Former colleagues, animators, and viewers shared memories tied not to events, but to feelings. One message read, "His music raised us, even when we didn't know it." Another simply said, "Thank you for the soundtrack of my childhood." In reflecting on Guy Vernon Moon's legacy, it becomes clear that his influence lives in emotion rather than credit. He helped shape how stories were felt, not just seen. His work reminds us that some artists leave behind monuments, while others leave behind memories. Moon belonged to the second group. His music did not demand recognition, but it earned permanence. It stayed with people as they grew older, resurfacing unexpectedly, carrying warmth from another time. Today, the animated worlds he helped build continue to play on screens around the world. Children still laugh at the same moments. The music still guides the emotion, steady and familiar. Somewhere between those notes, Guy Vernon Moon remains present. He did not just score television shows. He scored time itself, placing emotion inside moments that would be remembered long after childhood faded. And in that lasting echo, his life's work continues, quiet, gentle, and forever part of the memories he helped create. Tragic news confirmed: David John Giusti Jr., a name etched in the heart of baseball history, passed away on January 11, 2026, at the age of 86. The quiet streets of Pittsburgh and Houston alike remember a man whose dedication to the game went far beyond the scoreboard. A pitcher, yes, but also a craftsman, a player who treated each game as a canvas, each pitch as a careful stroke. Born on November 27, 1939, in the heart of Brooklyn, New York, Giusti grew up in an era when baseball was more than a pastime, it was a calling. The rhythms of sandlots and local diamonds shaped him early, instilling in him the values of patience, precision, and relentless practice. Those hours spent perfecting the curveball, studying batters' eyes, and learning the silent language of the mound laid the foundation for a career that would span 15 seasons in Major League Baseball. Giusti made his MLB debut in 1962 with the Houston Colt .45s. For many, it was a single statistic line in a box score, but for those who knew him, it marked the beginning of a life defined by discipline and quiet determination. His right-handed pitch was never flashy, yet it was deadly precise. As teammate Willie Stargell once said in an interview, David didn't just throw the ball, he commanded respect every time he stepped on the mound. You knew he had thought 5 moves ahead, even before the batter did. Through the 1960s and 1970s, Giusti became a cornerstone for multiple teams: the Houston Colt .45s, Pittsburgh Pirates, St. Louis Cardinals, Oakland Athletics, and the Chicago Cubs. But it was with the Pirates that his name became inseparable from triumph. Between 1970 and 1975, the team claimed 5 National League Eastern Division titles in 6 years, a testament to cohesion, talent, and Giusti's steady hand in the bullpen. The pinnacle came in 1971, when the Pirates captured the World Series. Fans recall his presence not only on the mound but in the dugout, his calm confidence an anchor during tense innings. Outside the field, Giusti's life was quietly remarkable. He mentored younger players, guiding them with a blend of technical knowledge and life wisdom. He often reminded rookies, "The game will test you, but it also teaches you. Learn from both." Friends and colleagues recall his soft humor, a laugh that could ease even the tensest clubhouse. Behind the competitive exterior was a man who understood that character mattered as much as talent. Challenges were never absent from his journey. Injuries tested his resolve, trades uprooted him from familiar surroundings, and the pressures of professional sports weighed heavily. Yet Giusti's response was always measured: methodical recovery, endless practice, and an unwavering commitment to the craft. His consistency became his signature. In a sport defined by unpredictability, he offered certainty, an example of how dedication could balance talent, shaping not only his career but the standards of the teams he served. When asked about his philosophy, Giusti once told reporters, "It's not about the applause or the headlines. It's about how you play the game and how you lift those around you." That quiet wisdom echoes today, as young athletes and fans alike reflect on the legacy of someone who valued effort, respect, and resilience above fleeting fame. Social media tributes flooded in after the announcement of his passing, many recalling his sportsmanship. "A true gentleman of the game," wrote one fan. "David Giusti taught us how to play and how to live," noted another. His final years were spent far from the glare of stadium lights but close to family and friends. He cherished time in his hometown, attending local games and offering guidance to the next generation of players. For Giusti, the sport was never just about records, it was about connection, mentorship, and the enduring joy of the game. As history records his achievements, it is the quiet, often overlooked aspects of his life that resonate most profoundly: the patience in perfecting a pitch, the guidance extended without fanfare, the steady presence in moments of high tension. His story reminds the world that greatness is not measured solely by victories or statistics but by the consistency of effort and the integrity of character. David Justy's legacy is felt in dugouts and ballparks across the nation, in the memories of teammates, and in the dreams of aspiring pitchers who study his career for lessons in precision and perseverance. His impact extends beyond sports. It is a model of commitment, humility, and grace under pressure. As fans, players, and friends say their farewells, it is this quiet strength that endures, a life devoted to mastery, mentorship, and the timeless rhythm of the game. In remembering David John Justy Jr., we honor a craftsman of the pitch, a pillar of character, and a man whose influence will ripple through baseball for generations to come. The diamond feels a little emptier now, yet his spirit lingers in every precise curveball, every lesson imparted, and every young player striving to emulate the quiet excellence he embodied. Today, we say goodbye, but the game remembers. Tragic news confirmed: Claudette Colvin, a quiet yet powerful figure in the story of American civil rights, passed away on January 13, 2026. The streets of Montgomery, Alabama, once filled with the echoes of her bravery, now remember a young girl whose courage shaped history long before the world recognized her name. At 15, she sat firmly in her seat on a segregated bus, refusing to give it up, not for attention, not for applause, but because she knew, even then, that justice demanded it. That moment, small in time but immense in consequence, set in motion a series of events that would reshape a nation. Born on September 5, 1939, Claudette Colvin grew up in a world divided by law and custom, yet defined by her own sense of right and wrong. Her family instilled in her the importance of dignity, responsibility, and standing firm even when the stakes were high. In March 1955, as the city's buses carried children, workers, and families through daily life, Colvin's refusal to move became a spark of resistance. Arrested that day, she faced the indignities and fears of a society unwilling to accept equality. Yet even in the shadows of youth and injustice, her resolve did not falter. Her arrest was the first step toward a historic legal challenge. Claudette became one of the plaintiffs in Browder v. Gale, the case that ultimately led the Supreme Court to declare bus segregation in Alabama unconstitutional. It was a quiet, legal triumph that often goes overlooked in the stories most widely told. As historian Angela Freeman once wrote, Claudette Colvin's courage reminds us that history is rarely made in the spotlight. Sometimes it begins in silence, in small acts that demand enormous bravery. The weight of that early experience lingered throughout her life. Colvin worked as a nurse aide, dedicating herself to care and service while carrying the memories of her teenage defiance. She lived largely outside public attention, but the moral clarity of that moment on the bus never left her. Friends and colleagues describe her as steadfast and humble, someone who never sought recognition yet understood the significance of her actions. Social media tributes after her passing reflected this quiet admiration. "She was a pioneer whose courage changed the course of history," wrote one user. Another noted, "Her story reminds us that even the youngest among us can shape justice." Colvin's life illustrates the cost of early bravery. The emotional and social pressures of her arrest, compounded by the era's rigid structures, meant her path was often difficult. Yet she never renounced her role in history. Instead, she carried it with dignity, embodying the principle that change does not require applause. Civil rights leaders who knew her personally recalled her as a quiet force, someone whose actions spoke louder than words ever could. Her passing on January 13, 2026, closes a chapter that the world has only recently begun to fully acknowledge. While her name may not have been as widely celebrated as others at the time, the impact of her courage is unmistakable. Schools, museums, and historical programs now teach of her stand, ensuring that future generations understand that moral courage often begins with small, resolute choices. Claudette Colvin's legacy is measured not in fame or headlines, but in the enduring principles she exemplified. Her life demonstrates that resistance can be quiet, yet profound, that integrity can persist in the face of systemic injustice, and that a single act of courage can ripple outward to reshape a nation. She reminds the world that history is built by those who are willing to act with conscience, even when recognition is uncertain. As tributes pour in from across the nation, from historians, educators, and everyday citizens alike, one sentiment resonates clearly: Claudette Colvin's bravery carved a path for justice and inspired countless others to stand firm in their convictions. She leaves behind a legacy of resilience, moral clarity, and the power of individual action. Today, her life is honored not only for what she did on that Montgomery bus, but for the lessons her courage continues to teach. In remembering Claudette Colvin, the world says farewell to a pioneer of conscience, a young woman whose stand became a cornerstone of civil rights. Though decades have passed since that moment in 1955, her story remains alive, an enduring testament to quiet strength, unwavering principle, and the profound ways one individual can shape the arc of history. Tragic news confirmed: Scott Raymond Adams, the mind behind one of the most recognizable reflections of the modern office, passed away on January 13, 2026. Offices from Seattle to New York quietly remember the humor he brought to cubicles and conference rooms, a reminder that even in routine work, there is insight waiting to be discovered. Adams observed the world of human systems not to mock, but to understand. Born in 1957 in Windham, New York, Adams' early life unfolded in the structured patterns of school and early jobs. He entered the corporate world, experiencing the rhythms, frustrations, and absurdities of office life firsthand. These experiences shaped the perspective that would eventually become Dilbert in 1989. The comic strip resonated because it did not exaggerate, it mirrored reality. Workers saw themselves in its panels, laughing softly at the situations they knew too well, recognizing both humor and truth in equal measure. Dilbert was more than a strip, it became a cultural lens. Adams captured ambition, miscommunication, and the quiet struggles of employees navigating hierarchical systems. Scott gave language to feelings we didn't know we could name, tweeted a longtime fan after the news of his passing. His work transcended comedy, offering a mirror of professional life that was equal parts entertaining and insightful. Beyond cartoons, Adams wrote extensively on persuasion, systems thinking, and human behavior. His nonfiction work expanded the principles embedded in his comics, exploring how people make decisions, navigate organizations, and understand influence. Colleagues recall his sharp intellect paired with a dry wit, describing him as someone who could illuminate complexity with clarity and humor. One editor remarked, "Scott always had a way of seeing patterns others missed, then showing them with a wink." His later years were marked by public commentary and continued reflection on society and technology. He engaged in discussions about workplace dynamics, leadership, and the evolving nature of professional life. Despite occasional controversies, those who knew him recognized a consistent aim: to help others see the systems around them more clearly, often through laughter. Adams' passing leaves a space not just in offices, but in the broader conversation about work, culture, and human behavior. The impact of his work is visible in classrooms, corporate training programs, and countless online discussions. His humor and insight allowed millions to understand their own experiences, offering both comfort and clarity. Social media posts after his death captured the sentiment succinctly: "He didn't just make us laugh, he helped us see ourselves." Another noted, "Scott Adams turned ordinary office life into a lens for understanding the human condition." Scott Raymond Adams' legacy rests in his ability to translate the subtleties of workplace life into shared understanding. His cartoons and writings remind us that humor is not trivial; it can be a guide, a reflection, and sometimes even a catalyst for change. He taught that observation, when paired with clarity, has the power to connect people across industries, generations, and experiences. In remembering Adams, the world says farewell to a quiet translator of human systems, a creator who used wit to illuminate truth, and a voice that will continue to echo in offices, living rooms, and minds everywhere. His work endures as both art and insight, a testament to the ways humor can reveal, educate, and inspire. Today, laughter and understanding feel a little emptier without him, yet his reflections remain, quietly shaping how people see the world around them. Tragic news confirmed: James Hartung, an Olympic gold medalist and a quiet force in American gymnastics, passed away on January 10, 2026, at the age of 65. Gymnasiums and training halls across the country remember a man whose life was defined by precision, endurance, and the steady rhythm of disciplined motion. Hartung's presence was never loud, but it left an indelible mark on those who witnessed his mastery. Born in 1960 in Omaha, Nebraska, Hartung discovered gymnastics as a young boy drawn to the challenge of control and balance. He embraced the demands of the sport with patience and determination, understanding that excellence was not born in flashes of talent but in repetition, focus, and unyielding practice. At the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, he led 4 national championship teams and earned consecutive NCAA all-around titles. Each achievement reflected not only skill but the careful cultivation of discipline over years of quiet work. The pinnacle of Hartung's career came at the 1984 Summer Olympics, where he captured gold as part of the U.S. gymnastics team. His performance was precise, measured, and composed, a reflection of the countless hours spent refining his craft. Teammates recall his calm presence in the moments before competition. "James had a way of making the toughest routines feel achievable," said one fellow Olympian. His focus was contagious. Hartung's influence extended far beyond his competitive years. He became a coach and mentor, instilling in young gymnasts the values that had guided his own career: consistency, balance, and integrity. His students often describe him as patient but exacting, someone who expected excellence not for fame or recognition, but because it cultivated character and resilience. Social media tributes following his passing highlighted this impact. "He didn't just teach gymnastics, he taught life," wrote one former pupil. Another shared, "Every gymnast who trained with him carries a part of his discipline forward." Even as the years passed, Hartung remained connected to the sport he loved. He attended competitions, offered guidance, and quietly celebrated the achievements of those who followed in his footsteps. Friends and colleagues noted that his presence brought a sense of calm authority. He reminded others that mastery was less about spectacle and more about sustained effort and attention to detail. James Hartung's legacy is built on more than medals and titles. It is found in the countless athletes he inspired, the standards he set, and the enduring idea that discipline and dedication leave a mark that lasts far beyond the spotlight. His life demonstrates that excellence is a steady pursuit, and that the quiet cultivation of skill can shape both personal character and collective belief in what is possible. In remembering Hartung, the world honors not only a gymnast of remarkable skill but a mentor, a guide, and a model of steadfast commitment. His passing leaves a stillness that mirrors the precision of a well-executed routine, a reminder of the calm power in lives built on discipline. Today, as his students and admirers reflect on his influence, they carry forward the lessons of balance, perseverance, and excellence that James Hartung embodied throughout his remarkable life.